Hello everyone, we got another video here. The Iran collapse is far worse than you think. Protests everywhere, no water, no electricity. Now, a lot of people probably don't have an expansive knowledge about what Iran is, and it's a really unique culture. Now, I'm assuming everyone's probably familiar with the Persian culture or the Persia Empire. I mean, if you see the movie 300, kind of like that. They were a great and mighty empire that probably expanded from Greece all the way to probably around India, somewhere in that wheelhouse. Today, the population of Iran is around 89 million people. Historically, they are a very vibrant culture, very lively, very family oriented. Overall, most of the time, I mean, most of the time, right? Good people. I mean, there's obviously bad apples in every culture, but most of the time are good people. But then around the 1970s, there was 1979 to be specific, there was Islamic Republic takeover or the Islamic Revolution that happened in Iran, and since 1979, that's where we've seen a lot of changes in culture and a lot of the music, the art, everything that we knew about Iran. So pretty much Persian culture, like anything about Persian culture that we knew was destroyed or pretty much shunned. It was pretty devastating. Iran had a great culture, beautiful culture. There's a band called I believe it was called the Black Cats. Really cool jazz band. There's plenty of videos online that you can see old culture. And you know what I find personally as an American fascinating about Iranian culture? It's how American it looks. And what I mean by that is that, yeah, obviously it's not American, but what I'm trying to explain to people is that they're similar, right? It's like yeah, if you can forget some of the things, as you're just watching the people and you're watching them dance and how it was so different. And I'm like, wow, it's like almost like America in a lot of ways, like what I'm watching in these videos. So Iran has gone through this crazy cycle that we've seen where it was a dictator and he was not really good. He was the guy that pretty much was fundamental in building all of these or started these horrible dam projects, which is really what is continued till this very day. Is that the Islamic Republic didn't stop from building dams because there was all this government lucrative spending that was hidden in there. So Iran now is currently facing a water issue mainly because of the poorly built dams. They built so many dams in bad places that they fucked up their water stream. One of the dams in particular, when they built it, scientists or whatever you call the surveyors, they said don't do this because this can affect your water source and fill it with a bunch of salt. They obviously didn't listen because there was billions and billions of dollars into this. Full Scented did it, and of course it tarnished the water source. So, yes, Iran is coming to this big issue right now that there is no water and their power grid has been very inconsistent. And on top of it, the reason why we haven't been seeing much of it is because the Iranian government has been controlling certain parts of their Wi-Fi or their internet. So like you have like certain time periods throughout the day that you have access to the internet, and even then it's restricted and limited to some degree. This is really fascinating. If you guys have not seen Business Basics, he's a really good channel. He does a great job kind of talking about this and putting together a YouTube safe version, because unfortunately some of the things that you probably can't show. And I think he's going to talk about his like Patreon or something along that line, or his own website. I think they got their own website. So super cool video. Let's dive into it. I kind of wanted to give a little history. And maybe throughout the video I'll throw in some quick facts. I'm trying to see if I forgot anything important. No, not really. I think I pretty much got a good summary there.
Iran is in total collapse.
These are some of the largest protests in Iran since 2022.
As we speak, thousands of Iranians have taken to the streets, marching and protesting against the government. Years of neglect, they simply cannot take it anymore. The people have decided that if the government cannot fix the problems, then maybe they no longer need a government at all. This is a fight for survival, dignity, and freedom. And from what has been happening these past few days, it seems that Iranians are ready to die for their beliefs rather than be oppressed any longer. In the next few minutes, you'll see why what is happening in Iran is far bigger, far more alarming, and far more connected to forces outside its borders than anyone expected. One glance at Iran's streets tells the story. Beneath the surface, something is boiling, and with each passing day, the flame of rebellion grows stronger.
Quick point. There is a lot of, I believe the population is more younger than older, for context. So maybe that's why we were pretty much seeing a lot of change happening in Iran. Young people are, I think a lot of Gen Z, right? We're seeing this Gen Z uprising amongst a lot of countries. And I think this could be a little bit like that, but specifically to Iran.
The frustration driving people into the open did not suddenly erupt in December. It has been building for months, first in silence, then breaking loose in a surge that can no longer be contained. It really began back in May of 2025. Truck drivers were among the first to stop working, fed up with shrinking pay and rising costs. Bakers soon followed after, struggling to afford flour and basic supplies. Factory workers walked out next. At the time, these actions felt small and scattered, easy for authorities to brush aside, but the pressure did not ease. Retirees joined in, angry that pensions no longer covered daily life. Students showed up next, and teachers stood beside them. Small groups gathered in public spaces, holding signs, chanting softly, testing how far they could go. With each week, those limits
I forgot his name specifically. I could take a second to look it up. If I had a live chat, this would definitely be convenient right now. But he is like the supreme dictator of the country. He is their religious head of the country as well as their supreme leader of the country. There's like a government body that's below them, and then there's like kind of like a religious government in there. So what this really is that this is Islamic. This is an Islamic government. So we're going to see a lot of the, mix of the two. This ain't secular like the United States is, and technically Turkey.
Stretched further. By the time autumn arrived, the spark had spread. What began as local protests over wages and shortages had grown into something larger and harder to contain. Crowds started filling the streets in city after city. Tehran, Isfahan, Shiraz, Mashhad, Hamadan, Kermanshah, Karaj, Malard, Keshemaylan, Zanjan, Paradis, Kerman. These were no longer isolated flare-ups. This was a national mood shifting in real time. People were no longer asking to be heard. They were refusing to step back. Then now, as we welcome 2026, something has changed. The unrest has gained a new kind of weight as Tehran's Grand Bazaar has closed its doors. For Iranians, this is a pivotal moment, as the bazaar is not just a place to shop, it is the country's economic pulse. When its doors shut, it sends a message everyone understands. Now, shopkeepers stand shoulder to shoulder, chanting as their voices echo through narrow corridors once filled with buyers and bargaining. A place built for trade became a stage for defiance. To understand why this matters so much, you have to understand the bazaar itself. For generations, it has reflected the nation's mood. When things are stable, it hums with life. When trouble is coming, it goes quiet. Now, rows of metal shutters are pulled down. Phone sellers are gone. Iron dealers are gone. Appliance stalls sit in darkness. That silence speaks louder than any protest chant outside. What makes this moment especially striking is who these merchants are. The bazaar has long been one of the most conservative pillars of Iranian society. In past crises, it often stood with the regime, even when others turned away. Closing shop is not just about lost income. It is a rare withdrawal of support. History shows that when the bazaar strikes, political grounds begin to shift, and this time is no different. Economic pain has eaten away at even the deepest loyalties, and the quiet halls of the bazaar now ring like a warning bell for the entire country. Protests stopped being about only prices and shortages.
So I just want to maybe add a little context to this part. So the Iranian bazaar, a bazaar is a large, often covered market made up of narrow streets, stalls, sells everything: spices, carpets, gold, textiles, food, tools. Historically economic backbone. Prices are negotiable. Bargaining is expected. Merchants often operate family businesses passed down for generations. Bazaars are social hubs, not just market. People meet, talk politics, exchange news, drink tea. So, I mean, okay, so this is like, I mean, I was following, but I just also was like sometimes just seeing it too. Closely tied to mosque and religious schools nearby, bazaar merchants, bazaris, have historically held huge influence. Okay, so is this like maybe a mall that has like, this just seems like a mall that's just like, I don't know what the word is, a mall on steroids, like with political, like a mob mall, like this. I don't know. It's just like a no, because this is like organized by like big time families. Okay, wait, hold on. Let's keep reading here. Bazaars play a key role in the 1979 revolution. Protests and strikes pressure the government. Famous bazaars: Grand Bazaar of Tehran, massive maze-like Bazaar of Isfahan, Tobias Bazaar, Universal World Heritage Site, Universal UNESCO. Me, I'm just saying it's like I'm saying it's like a park. Modern context, still important, but now competes with malls and online. So it is like a mall, okay. But this seems like it's kind of like a political. So this is like a political mall. So these are like families who've held this for so long. It's become this huge cultural staple in the country. So now, because it's like become the social mega meeting ground, like this, pretty much everything happens here. It's like a mega mall.
A while ago. Now they've become open challenges to the leadership itself. Even things as religious as chants targeting these.
So these are like, if I'm assuming these are like if like a mafia families had like political power, and they just grew with the government because the government was never strong enough to really like separate it, right? I'm assuming it's kind of like that. Who knows? I could be wrong on that one.
Now, showing how the mood has hardened and how frustration has turned into defiance. The chants have left no room for doubt. Crowds are roaring death to the dictator in Tehran, Isfahan,
that's huge. It's
Shiraz,
never happened.
And beyond. Words that were once carried in
Hasn't happened in a while.
now shouted openly in the streets. What begins as anger over bread and wages is transforming into a direct assault on the very core of authority. The slogans cut through the air like a verdict, echoing off shuttered shops and government buildings. Each cry is more than a protest. It is a declaration that patience has run out. The people are no longer pleading for relief. They are demanding an end to the rule itself. On the ground, the streets feel fragile, as if they could tip at any moment. Smoke rises from burning barricades, carrying the sharp smell of fuel and melting plastic. Sirens scream, then disappear beneath the roar of thousands of voices. Police form lines at intersections, shields locked, batons raised. The scene paints a picture of confrontation and finality. For many in the crowd, it feels less like a protest and more like a breaking point. A single message hangs in the air. Enough is enough. Reports speak of clashes and violent confrontations, but the full cost is hidden behind strict censorship. Even so, blood stains the pavement, mixing with rain and dust, offering fleeting glimpses of what cameras never fully capture. And yet, mixing with rain and...
The United States military base that everyone talks about was right over here. I think it's somewhere in this region. The largest military base, the one that Trump always complains about, it's right there.
Dust, offering
Somewhere
fleeting
in that
glimpses
region.
of what cameras never fully capture. And yet, despite the brutality, the protests keep growing. Every clash seems to do the opposite of what the authorities intend. It hardens resolve. Every attempt to crush the movement only fuels it. Instead of fading, the fire spreads wider, brighter, and harder to contain with each passing day. This intensity is not limited to the capital. Kurdish neighborhoods, long ignored by the central government, now echo with chants and drums. Oil workers in Asselouyet have abandoned rigs. Retirees join rallies in city centers. Parents hold their children's hands while chanting slogans against shortages and corruption. Grandparents raise voices that have been silent for years. The protests carry the weight of families who cannot bathe freely, cook their meals without rationing, or watch their children grow up with dignity. The streets are no longer just lines on a map. They are a living mirror of daily survival. All of this makes it clear. The protests are not random outbursts. They are the result of years of frustration, hardship, and neglect. To understand why people have reached this breaking point, you have to look at the forces that pushed them into the streets and left them with no choice but to act. For years, people across Iran have been holding on, telling themselves things might get better if they just wait a little longer. Prices climbed month after month, while wages quietly lost their value. Basic goods became harder to find, and when they did appear, they cost more than most families could afford. Parents skipped meals or cut corners so their children could eat. Students stayed up late, studying and dreaming of futures that always seemed just out of reach. Workers showed up every day to jobs that barely covered the bills, convincing themselves that stability would eventually return. Through it all, frustration was carried, quietly. People learned how to survive instead of live. They hoped the government would step in, or that someone, somewhere, would fix what was breaking. The hope was thin and fragile, built on promises that were repeated often but never delivered. Still, many clung to it because letting go felt even more frightening. Then the rial collapsed, and whatever people had been holding on to finally slipped away. In December, the currency plunged to around 1.54 million against the US dollar, the lowest point in Iran's history. Almost overnight, prices for food, medicine, and everyday essentials shot up. What had already been difficult became impossible. Inflation, already above 40%, pushed simple items out of reach in a matter of weeks. Families who would have been barely managing were suddenly forced to confront the truth that they could no longer avoid.
Low-key looks like California there. Not gonna even cap.
You could see that moment clearly in Tehran's Grand Bazaar. Shopkeepers slammed their doors shut. Counters were hit in anger. Shouts echoed through narrow alleyways that had been quiet for years.
Like, if you were to tell me that like, this is somewhere on the West Coast, specifically in California, I'm just ripping California. Love the people, but like, come on.
Were not people known for protest. They were merchants who had endured crisis after crisis in silence. Their reaction said everything. The fall of the rial was not just an economic shock. It was the moment many realized that no help was coming. As the currency spiraled downward, it became a symbol of everything slipping away at once. Savings vanished. Security disappeared. Dignity eroded. The small hope people had carried for years finally broke. What replaced it was not confusion, but clarity. The collapse exposed a reality everyone had felt for a long time but could no longer tolerate. Life in Iran had become unbearable. Waiting had achieved nothing. Trust had been exhausted. When people poured into the streets, they were not only protesting prices or currency rates, they were fighting for survival. For years, frustration had been swallowed and pushed aside. Now it demanded to be heard. But this is not the full picture. It is tempting to blame everything on the collapse of the rial, but that only explains the moment things snapped, not why they were already breaking. The currency crash was the trigger, not the cause. What pushed Iran to this point was years of slow damage piling up, year after year, without real repair. For more than a decade, the economy had been weakening in plain sight. Poor management hollowed out institutions meant to protect people. Corruption siphoned money away from public services and into private networks. Sanctions restricted trade and cut off access to foreign currency. Businesses struggled to import materials. Families struggled to plan even a month ahead. Instead of tackling these problems head-on, leaders leaned on short-term fixes, printing money, borrowing more, pushing pain into the future. Each year, the crack...
Yeah, like the United States does pretty much the same thing in its own way. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe Iran's banking system is like not like, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not like connected to the world system. Like it's like I think it's like locked into its own country. I'm brain farting on the exact term for it, but its economy and stuff is very within itself.
Grew a little wider until the system could no longer hold its weight. That breakdown shows clearly in the government's finances. For several years now, Iran has been running massive budget deficits, climbing toward nearly 30% of GDP by 2024 and 2025. This did not happen overnight. It built up slowly as spending kept rising while revenue fell, especially under sanctions.
Yeah, the United States did that one.
To cover the gap, the state turned to borrowing and money creation. That choice had consequences. For ordinary Iranians, this meant life quietly shrinking. Paychecks brought fewer items each month. Rent swallowed larger shares of income. Food became something to measure carefully. Saving felt pointless.
I'm not trying to keep pausing it. I'm not trying to keep talking. But like when I see all of these issues, I very much see there's a common issue here. Like option one, paychecks. Yeah, no, paychecks are getting shorter now this year, all the taxes going up. Rent's harder now. Food you got to be careful with. And yeah, it's hard to save now more than ever before because everyone's are more tighter. So it's really interesting to see how, yeah, Iran's having the same issues, but we also have similar issues in kind of that way too. I don't know. I find that very fascinating.
because inflation erased it anyway. Even
Inflation.
before the real collapsed, families were already falling behind. Many held on,
It's a
hoping
little
things would
different,
stabilize.
obviously. I'm just
Instead,
trying
the
to
ground
relate.
kept slipping. Sanctions made everything worse. Fresh snapback measures from the UN and Europe tightened pressure just as people were running out of room to cope. These came on top of Trump's renewed maximum pressure campaign after the June strikes. As a result, foreign trade slowed to a crawl. Cash reserves consequently dried up and imports stalled. As usual, the pain of this was reflected on the citizens as the cost of living surged. Bread that once cost 20,000 rials jumped to 35,000. Fuel prices rose by more than 30%. Medicine became scarce, or so expensive that families simply went without. Poor management at home lit the fuse, but those external blows turned a slow burn into a wildfire. Ordinary families were left paying for decisions made far beyond their control. As economic pressure mounted, it collided with another crisis that people could no longer ignore: the collapse of the environment, especially water. Tehran is now approaching what experts call zero day, the point where taps could run dry within weeks. For a city of nearly 15 million people, that fear changes everything. And this is not speculation. Iran has endured 6 straight years of drought that have left the nation parched. Reservoirs that once sustained the capital are at historic lows. The Amir Kabir Dam is down to about 8% capacity, and the Latyan Dam is below 10%. The reality has already reached people's homes.
Oh, my mic was muted. That's why I always double check because I get worried. You guys are gonna find out if I hope he should bring this up. But these dams, the way they built them, I think I think he has a video on this, and we'll go back and watch it for context for this one. But yeah, it's crazy to see how poorly managed they just built the dams that killed their water source and all the natural agricultural land around it. It's kind of crazy.
Some neighborhoods lose water for hours at a time. Families ration what they can store. Washing clothes, bathing, and even cooking become calculated decisions. For people already crushed by inflation, the thought of losing water turns stress into panic. Zero day is not a metaphor. It's a countdown. This disaster is not just about the weather. Years of mismanagement made it far worse. Dams were built without long-term planning. Aquifers were drained until they collapsed. Water was wasted on low-yield crops while cities dried out. Nearly 90...
Oh, yeah, because they switched their entire... so Iran has very specific crops that grow in their region because they're better for the dry climate. They don't need a lot of water. I don't remember what they are, but I know they have them. And then they totally switched it for like watermelons, corn, soybean, wheat, all great things, all things that I hope they have, like melons too. But the problem is they all require a lot of water, like a lot of water. That's why if you guys notice, Saudi Arabia will be buying up our land out here in the United States, and then they'll grow their really watery, dense plant that they use to feed their cows and shit. They'll grow it out here and burn all of our water. For some reason, the United States allows that. Makes absolutely no sense.
80% of Iran's water goes to agriculture, which delivers little return. Farmers abandon land worked on for generations. Cities queue for rationed supplies. Officials have even warned that Tehran may need to be evacuated if the rains do not come. The idea of moving a capital city shows how close the system is to breaking. As water disappears, air quality collapses too. Cheap fuel, outdated refineries, and drought have turned cities into choking traps. In the summer of 2025,
Looks like
the temperatures
California.
in Tehran pushed close to
Kidding.
50 degrees Celsius. I can't even imagine that heat. Naturally, offices and banks shut down. And you see, heat trapped pollution over the city. And with reservoirs nearly empty, there was nothing left to hold back strong dust and smog. As a result, health problems rose, crops failed, and food security weakened. This quite literally means that for the average Iranian, every breath has become heavier. Power outages add yet another layer of strain. Whole neighborhoods go dark without warning, leaving families sitting in the heat, waiting for the lights to flick back on. Fridges stop humming, food starts to spoil, and what little security people had managed to hold on to slips away with every blackout. At the same time, gasoline prices climb higher. cutting deeper into already shrinking incomes. Getting to work, running a generator, even keeping a small shop alive, suddenly feels out of reach. The things that once kept daily life moving, like electricity, fuel, and refrigeration, are now turning into burdens. Outdated grids and dwindling water supplies make electricity feel like a luxury instead of something people can count on. For families already stretched thin, these failures push them past their limits. A blackout is not just an inconvenience anymore. It is a reminder that the system cannot even provide the basics of modern life. Each spoiled meal, each powerless night, each unaffordable tank of fuel drives home the same truth. Survival is getting harder by the day. Throughout all of this, one thing has stood out clearly: the idea of how little the state cares for them. While families are told to conserve water and endure toxic air, the state has continued pouring money into military and foreign ambitions. In 2025 alone, defense spending rose 35% to about $23 billion. Missiles were fully...
Yeah, why invest in their water, infrastructure, resources, education, medicine? No, we have to build nuclear weapons, priority number one. We all need just like India. Like India, like no offense people who live there, but doesn't make sense when you got like poop all over the street and like you guys are spending like billions of dollars in like missiles. Like, yep, congratulations, you guys can go to the moon. But like we don't like you like clean up your streets eventually. Like that would be kind of nice. I would love to go visit one day. Be very cool, but like I would have a panic attack on the Indian trains. Would not be able to do that. I would probably have too much. I didn't even like saying this, but that would give me anxiety. Is what I'm saying. I just couldn't do that. Too much. I don't know. I'm not trying to go too crazy on India. The people are great. I love the food when it's here in America. It tastes great. Have had nothing but good experiences. But like I just don't understand like with Iran here. It's like, dude, it's like these concepts. Let's build missiles, spend on military, and no water.
funded.
Pakistan was fighting India for water too, bro. I'm telling you, this area is just crazy, man, with this water
Military
shit.
projects were heavily
Be
expanded.
very thankful here
None
in
of these
America.
actions lowered food prices, filled reservoirs, or cleared the air. The contrast was impossible to miss. While billions flowed into weapons, nuclear facilities, and foreign alliances, at home, families wondered whether the tap would run or just cough out dust and air. Think about that for a second. The nuclear program was sold for decades as progress and pride. However, a few trillion later, for many Iranians, it has become a symbol of sacrifice without reward. By 2025, Iran had reached nuclear threshold status, enriching uranium to 60%. The scale was enormous, and yet daily life barely changed. Electricity did not get cheaper. Jobs
And then Don bombed him up, and then we're going for round 2 now. Yeah, that's going to be interesting if we do that.
did not multiply, and food remained
Don't even know
expensive.
why we're going to have
From
to go
the
back
perspective of a regular citizen, the money always seemed to flow out and never in. That's why, for many, foreign partnerships have deepened the strain. For example, in 2025, Iran signed a 20-year strategic partnership with Russia covering defense, energy, and technology. The deal promised new investment and advanced systems. Little of that has appeared. Instead, they pulled Iran deeper into geopolitical conflicts and triggered harsher sanctions. All the while, Russia benefits from energy exports and defense cooperation. What the people see is their beloved land becoming the punching bag and absorbing the cost of conflicts it did not start. The sense of injustice has hardened into anger. Over time, these failures stacked up. Economic pressure, environmental collapse, foreign priorities that ignored daily survival. The fall of the rial simply exposed what had already broken. That weight has now spilled into the streets. Youth unemployment remains crushing, nearly 20% in cities, and almost double for young women. College degrees lead to waiting, not opportunity. Dreams turn into plans to leave. Strikes spread across factories, schools, oil fields, and hospitals. Teachers walk out. Medical staff joins them. Minors, retirees, and students march side by side. Parents protest with their children. So, when you step back and look at all of it, this is no longer a single problem spinning out of control. It is a full collision. Economic failure, environmental collapse, and misplaced priorities have crashed into each other all at the same time. This is not about fixing one policy or adjusting one budget line. It is a national breaking point. People are no longer asking for reform or patience. They're asking for the basics of life. water, food, stability, dignity. And they are done waiting quietly while those things slip away. Then came the moment that changed everything. On December 18th, the president finally said
Is this like a Tiananmen Square thing? Like, this would be bad.
out loud what people had already felt for years. Speaking to university students and academics, he admitted the crisis was beyond the government's control. His words were blunt and almost resigned. If someone can do something, by all means, go for it. I can't do anything. Don't curse me. This was not a promise.
I
It
thought
was
we were
not a
about to see
plan.
something bad.
It was an open confession that the system had reached its limits. For years, leaders had insisted the economy could be stabilized. They said sanctions could be managed. They promised shortages would ease. But now the truth was out in the open. The president himself confirmed what daily life had already proven. The government could not fix this. That admission hit hard. It changed the mood of the country almost overnight. The collapse was no longer framed as bad luck or temporary
I just think of Call of Duty when I see that logo.
pain. It was exposed as a failure at the very top. When the president admitted that there was no solution in hand, anger shifted into something deeper. This was no longer about wages, inflation, or empty shelves. It became about survival and dignity. Families were already stretched to the edge. Now they were being told openly that no help was coming. Any illusion of control disappeared, and with it went the belief that change could come from inside the system. Then, just days later, that sense of abandonment grew sharper. On December 29th, 2025, Mohammad Reza Farazin, the governor of Iran's central bank, abruptly resigned. For years, he had overseen reckless monetary policies, rising deficits, and quiet inflation that wiped out savings and crushed the middle class. When the crisis finally exploded, he walked away. To many Iranians, this did not feel like accountability. It felt like an escape. Together, the president's confession and the central bank's governor's resignation sent a clear message. The people in charge were not fixing the damage. They were backing away from it. The collapse of the rial, the shuttered shops, the empty shelves, and the drying taps were not accidents. They were the result of deliberate choices made by leaders who now seemed ready to leave others to deal with the consequences. For families watching their savings vanish and their children go hungry, Farazin's exit was not a solution. It was proof that the system was unraveling. The people who steered the country into the storm were stepping aside, while everyone else was left standing in the wreckage. That double blow explains why these protests feel different. Leadership did not just fail, it admitted defeat, and then it began to retreat. That is why the demonstrations are bigger, louder, and more intense than anything seen in years. The protests are no longer driven by hope for reform. They are fueled by the realization that no one at the top is coming to help. And at this point, some people...
Fair enough, man. I mean, I feel like that's the same thing for here. Our politicians, they don't seem like they're going to help us. It's not me trying to say we should throw a revolution, but I just think people need to start thinking better about voting. Because when I see that shit, that's just what I think of. That's just how I process.
might say, well, protests have happened in Iran before. This is just another phase. But that misses what makes this moment different. In the past, protests often centered on political slogans or ideological demands. This time, the fight is more basic. It's about survival, about dignity, about the ability to live with water, food, and security. When families cannot bathe, cook, or afford bread, protests stop being political and it becomes about existence. You can hear that shift in the chants. What began as anger over prices now openly targets the supreme leader. It rejects money spent on foreign conflicts while people at home go without. Economic pain has turned into rejection of shift in the chants. What began as anger over prices now openly targets the supreme leader. It rejects money spent on foreign conflicts while people at home go without.
Interesting.
Economic pain has turned into rejection of the entire system. That makes these protesters harder to silence. People are not marching for abstract ideas. They are marching for their lives. The scale is staggering. Right now, protests have spread across the country. That covers the major towns and dozens of smaller towns. With every new town or city, the momentum grows, building towards a full national rebellion. This is not one group speaking out. It was the country speaking as one. And beneath the anger runs another powerful force: inequality. Those with money and connections are already finding exits. As problems at home intensify,
That's kinda nice.
the Iranians are moving funds abroad. They are buying property in Dubai, Istanbul, and London. These cities offer clean water, stable electricity, and safety. For the elites, escape is possible. For everyone else,
Just like every other, so many countries in Latin America have experienced the same issue, where it's like they get involved with like a big foreign government, and that foreign government tells them whatever they can do. United States definitely got caught up in a little bit in Latin America with some government overthrows and stuff. CIA was a little bit involved in some places. But that being said, a lot of these like elites in these countries, these small poor countries, especially when it was in the 1900s and stuff, they would get all their business set up, organize, whatever, make all the money they can, get deals with the governments, and then sometimes a lot of these corporations, like you guys ever heard of the Banana Republic? That's actually because of a banana company in America combined with another one, and then they bought up a lot of shit in Guatemala, Panama, El Salvador, like all that stuff, and Haiti, all the islands, Jamaica, and they were growing bananas literally all over the place, and they were just getting like deals with all the dictators, swapping out like land for just quick cash. And the people really lost all their land. Like some of these governments, and I think in Guatemala, they were literally taking like the people's land, like even the villages of the natives, and taking all their land and saying, well, we're going to give it to the corporation here in America. And they pretty much were fucked over the citizens, and everyone was kind of, all the government elites were okay with it. But after the fall of the dictatorship or whatever was there at the time, they fled to the United States. And the United States has had a few South American leaders in the early 1900s and 1940s and 50s that did it. And the reason why Guatemala decided to revolt was because they overheard FDR's speech, and it was about when FDR was talking about freedom and how the United States joined World War II to defeat the fascists and for freedom, and yet the United States was having their corporations go over there and enslave them, pretty damn well enslave them. Like I think the cap amount of money they're able to make a day was like 50 cents, which is like nothing. And that was, back in the day, mind you. But yeah, and all the elites left the country and went to the United States. A lot of, and happened all over the world.
It is not.
So it's
That's
not
where the wealth
shocking there.
disparity starts to sink in. Unlike the ultra-wealthy, most people cannot leave. They cannot buy security or transfer their lives overseas. They stay behind, rationing bread, queuing for water, and facing batons in the streets. That contrast deepens the divide. It makes the injustice impossible to ignore. The system protects those who can afford to escape and abandons those who cannot. Survival, dignity, and fairness become the heart of the movement. Because of that, fear, once the regime's strongest tool, has lost its grip. When survival is on the line, arrests and violence no longer feels like the worst outcome. One street is cleared, another fills up the next day. Desperation has replaced fear. And desperation is louder than intimidation. The response from the state has been firm. Security forces have deployed tear gas and batons to break up gatherings, leading to clashes in Tehran, Hamadan, and other cities. Some opposition reports claim direct shooting at protesters in isolated areas, though details remain unconfirmed amid
A little
tight
Tiananmen
information
Square
controls.
action there.
Arrests have followed in several spots, adding to the tension. Officials acknowledge the economic pain, but warn that unrest could be exploited by outside forces. That mix of force and deflection has only sharpened frustrations on the ground. At the same time, the government leans on the same old tricks. Price caps, emergency imports, a few handouts, and reshuffling ministers. None of it touches the real crisis. A bag of rice cannot undo years of collapse, and new faces can't fix broken policies. People have seen this pattern too many times. It no longer buys trust. President Masoud Pezeshkian has even tried a different approach. On December 30th, he acknowledged what he called the protesters' legitimate demands. He urged restraint and ordered talks with representatives. It was a rare move, one that broke from hardline responses. But after years of broken promises, many on the streets heard only more words. What might have been a bridge now feels like hesitation. Truthfully, short-term fixes cannot extinguish a crisis this deep. The fire has been burning for years, and that is why the question is no longer whether the protests will continue. The real question is, what comes next? To be frank, the road ahead for Iran is uncertain, but the possible paths are already visible. Each one is risky, and each one could be triggered by events happening right now. Nothing exists in isolation. Every decision, every shortage, every protest interacts with the others. The crises feed off of each other. They build momentum and make each outcome more unpredictable. The first and most urgent danger is escalation. This is the path that could turn simmering anger into a storm that sweeps the country. Another sharp drop in the real could erase whatever little savings families have left.
Yep.
A fresh round of water rationing could push Tehran closer to 0 day, the moment when the taps could run dry entirely. Another strike in the oil sector could ripple through the economy, leaving prices even higher and frustration even sharper. The South Paras oil strike showed just how fast unrest can spread from one sector to the entire.
Their entire industries are very fragile. Like, I believe a lot of their mining and infrastructures in the southern half of the region where there's not a lot of water because it's very hot in that part of their country. And so they had to build a bunch of pipelines and stuff to that region to just for manufacturing and for steel. Well, their steel industry has kind of gotten fucked up because of that. A lot of mismanagement in a lot of their, obviously, he said, government officials. And now we're seeing pretty much. I honestly want to say this could be a matter of time where we could be looking at potentially the downfall of Iran. And that's not maybe a bad thing. Maybe that'll be an opportunity for their people to instill a good government that actually represents them, and we could potentially see the freedom of Persian culture again. And I'm a Greek, and I'm a Greek now. We got some history there, but at the end of the day, they do have a great history and a great culture. So, who knows? It's a really interesting time right now in Iran, and maybe if the people win.
Nation.
Who
This
knows what
combination of
happens?
economic collapse, environmental stress, and labor disruptions could ignite a nationwide uprising. The anger that has been building for years is ready to overflow. Once it does, it could be
Iranian?
almost impossible to control. The situation in western Iran adds a dangerous layer. Kurdish communities in provinces like Kermanshah have long carried deep grievances against the central government. Crowds there have already joined the protests. And frustration runs deeper than in many other areas. Security forces are already stretched thin, trying to manage demonstrations in Tehran, Isfahan, Shiraz, and beyond. If unrest flares along the borders at the same time as the capital, it could pull resources away at a critical moment. Militants and opportunists who have waited for openings during the past unrest might see a chance now. If local anger links with outside forces, the crisis could move from street protests to something far more violent and difficult to contain. That kind of flare-up would not stay local. It could ripple across borders, destabilize fragile regions, and draw in neighbors who never wanted to be involved. Fragmentation is another possibility. Localized protests could continue without coordination, burning hot in one city and fading in another. Repression, arrests, and fatigue could slow the movement over time. Hundreds have already been killed, and thousands detained. Fatigue is a tool the state knows how to use. If fear returns or if communities feel isolated, momentum could break. The anger would remain, but without unity, it might never become a force capable of demanding real change. It would be like sparks flashing and then dying out, leaving only the faint smell of smoke and disappointment. Policy correction remains another path, though history shows it rarely happens without serious pressure from the streets. The government could attempt transparency, targeted subsidies, or infrastructure fixes to ease suffering. Cutting foreign and military spending could free billions for food, medicine, and water projects. Defense spending alone jumped 35% in 2025, reaching $23 billion. That money could have stabilized households and prevented some of the desperation now visible in every city. But leaders rarely act without coercion, and citizens know this. Without pressure, policy promises stay words on paper.
Sometimes politicians are just full of shit. Any country. Like you said, all that money that could have been used on its people wasn't. That's all people are really asking for at the end of the day in any country is that, hey, all these taxes and all these profits, everything we pay for, can you use it on us? A little bit? Please?
Empty gestures that fail
That's all
to
we're
reach the
asking
people
for,
in need.
please.
External shocks present the most dangerous path. A regional conflict could amplify every weakness inside the country. Beyond Iran's borders, the unrest is drawing sharp attention. Washington and Tel Aviv sense an opening. President Trump has a meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu to hash out their competing visions for the Middle East. But on Iran, their interests converge. In public remarks, Trump went further, threatening new strikes and vowing to knock the hell out of them if Tehran pushed too far. For Israel, the protests and economic collapse weaken a longtime adversary. For the United States, they offer a chance to pressure Iran at a moment of vulnerability. Russia and China are moving in the opposite direction.
I just don't understand why. Why does Israel have to be like always a part of this? Like when it comes to something in the Middle East, like Israel always has to be there. Like, why? I just don't get it. Like every time I see this, I'm just like, man, like I just want a president to just be focused on us, less on Israel. Like, look, if we're gonna spend so much money in Israel at this point, like I'd be okay if we like America walked in there was like, yo, dude, let's just build like parking garages everywhere. This is America's now, like Kingdom of America. Let's just run it, call it that. I'd be okay with that. I would be okay with that. It's fine. We could just call it Kingdom of America. You know, it'd be kind of sick. We already have given billions upon billions of dollars of our own hardcore tax-paying money for them. At this point, if we're gonna have the president of Israel always come over, man, why don't we just write down the fine contract at this point? Just like so annoying how it's always wraps.
Tightening energy and arms ties with
And again, it's the government, not the people. The government.
Iran. Gulf states like Saudi Arabia and the UAE watch closely, worried about instability, but also aware of the chance to chip away at Iran's regional influence. In this way, the domestic crisis is no longer just about bread lines and water shortages. It is becoming a stage where outside powers test their leverage, each calculating how...
Just a quick food for thought. What would happen if the United States, Russia, and China all set aside their differences and just got along? You know how crazy that would be? Like, I understand Europe would flip shit on this, but, like, if the big three can just get along, like, the entire world would just be a better place. Like, if we're being honest right now. Like, dude, there's China, dude, people in China are based as fuck. So, like, I know there's a lot of good people over there in China. And, like, Russians, they're kind of like the Americans of Europe, if you really think about it. Like, I've seen this video of this fucking Russian woman wearing a bikini, having a fucking gun in one hand, a beer in the other, and she's driving a fucking four-wheeler. Don't ask me how it's happening. It's happening. She's like shooting the gun. And I go, that looks like one hell of an American video right there. But like, you know, Mr. Ping, Xi Jinping, why can't you just like work out a good deal with us, man? Mr. Putin, come on, man. Let's figure this out. Let's just like get the big three together, work out a good contract, get some deals going. I mean, I'm telling you, if we can get Russia to stop bombing Ukraine, and we can get Ukraine to stop bombing Russia, and we can fix that war, think about how great this place would be. I'm telling you, I feel like if the big three just got along somehow, a lot of these little side conflicts don't happen. That's really my main point.
Far Iran can bend before it breaks. Climate extremes make all of this worse. Prolonged droughts could force the rationing of water in major cities. Frustration could turn into panic. Tehran's reservoirs are already dangerously low. One more dry season could push millions into an immediate survival crisis. Combine that with sanctions or conflict, and even minor shocks could escalate into full-blown disasters. The system is fragile, stretched thin, and under relentless pressure. In a country this unstable, even a small push from outside could trigger a far larger internal crisis. No matter which path unfolds, the signs are clear. Citizens are watching. The government is watching. History is watching. Every shortage, every protest, every policy choice builds on what came before. They shape what comes next, often in ways no one can really fully predict. Iran today is trapped in a storm of crises that collide and reinforce one another. The economy has been hollowed out by corruption and mismanagement. Drought and poisoned air strangle the environment. Military spending drains billions while families ration bread and water. Foreign entanglements deepen isolation instead of providing relief. Together, these failures confirm what people feel in their daily lives. The system is broken. It cannot reliably feed its citizens. It cannot provide clean water. It cannot shield families from inflation or violence. This is why the protests have grown beyond politics or ideology.
People just
They are
want
now
to feel
about
good, man.
survival, about dignity, about reclaiming control over lives that feel stripped of choice. Parents march alongside their children. Workers strike beside teachers. Retirees walk shoulder to shoulder with students. The human face of the movement is unmistakable. It is asking a single urgent question. How long can a government survive when it cannot meet the basic needs of its people?
Super
Imagine
good.
for a second that
Oh, super good video, huh? Let me go back to that. Super good video. Definitely give business basics a view. This guy is great. I really watch a lot of my European content that I get. Well, I say European. I mean a lot of my like geopolitical content does. Some of it comes from this guy, and he really does a great job. He breaks it down very well, as you saw there. I try to add my colorful 2 cents into this. But yeah, no, this is super interesting. Iran is pretty much dealing with a lot of the similar issues a lot of other places are dealing with, but theirs is different because it's being like they have economic issues, they have um, food issues, they have corruption issues, and now on top of it, they have a water issue. It's just crazy. It's just total. How it even got to this point is astonishing. The fact that their own government leaders couldn't even put aside one, like, you guys are making money, everyone's eating, but your people aren't eating. Like, come on, everyone needs to eat here. Like, and now you're running out of water, and like, okay, fine, you want to like mess people's pocketbooks, go ahead. Some people will be pushovers with that, and then you want to, restrict their freedoms. Okay, obviously in America that's not good, but sure, I guess in Iran you can do that, and some people would be okay with that. But then you can, religious government, then you have a bunch of censorship on your internet, and then just censorship in general. Just a whole host of problems. And now they're at a point where the water runs out, and when people lose you're just stacking everything up, and at one point the dominoes are all going to fall. It's just crazy how governments can mismanage so hard. Like, and it's just, I don't get it. Like, how did Iran not at one point realize that this was going to, like, everyone was okay just taking the shit, it seemed like. Well, not they were not okay with it, but they were at least contempt with what was going on there for a while. And then you just made all their daily lives just even harder. And once you take away the consistency and someone able to go get water, that's survival, and this guy brought it up multiple times in the video. They're in a survival mode. So super cool video. I appreciate your guys' support. If whoever watches this long, I've gotten a lot of great comments on these videos, and I appreciate it. You guys have been very nice, and I've always loved that. Giving me some honest feedback, which is always good and appreciated. So yeah, I don't think I got any more. Always appreciate it. Subscribe if you guys like to see more of this content. Let me know what you guys like and don't like. That's why I always appreciate likes and not. And yeah, share, help me out. Drop your comments, your thoughts, overall opinions, any questions, comments. So yeah, I know I'm rambling right now. I'll cut it off here. I tend to do this. I'm excited to talk to you guys. So all right, guys, appreciate it. Thank you for your love and support. Have a good one.